She was never really part of this family the way the rest of you were. Dad would have understood. My mother said that out loud, in a lawyer's office, while my father's body was barely cold. The room smelled like old paper and air conditioning that had been running too long. I could hear the clock on the wall. I could hear my own breathing. And then the lawyer set down his pen, looked over his glasses, and said, very quietly, "Mrs. Calloway, before we proceed, I need to ask you about this signature date." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My sister stopped fidgeting. My brother stopped smiling. My mother's face went completely still. That was the moment everything she thought she'd buried came back to the surface, and it was about to bury her instead. My name is Renee. I'm 36 years old, and this is the story of how my own mother tried to erase me from my father's will, and how 11 years of paralegal work saved everything he meant to leave me. I grew up in Ohio, in the kind of family that looked fine from the outside. My dad, Gerald Calloway, was a quiet man. He built his auto parts business from nothing, one honest deal at a time. He didn't talk much, but when he looked at you, you felt like you mattered. My mother was different. She was the one who decided things. She decided who got praised at the dinner table, who got introduced first at church, and who got the benefit of the doubt when things went wrong. I was the middle child, not the oldest, which was my brother Derek, who carried authority like a badge, not the youngest, which was my sister Paige, who could charm anyone in under 60 seconds. I was the one in the middle, the one who showed up quietly, handled things, and rarely got thanked for it. I put myself through community college. I built a career as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm downtown. My family thought it was ordinary. Derek was in sales, always closing some deal he'd tell you about twice. Paige had a lifestyle brand, filters and followers, and a comment section full of heart emojis. And then there was me, reading contracts and flagging discrepancies and drinking bad office coffee. I wasn't glamorous. I didn't drive a luxury car or post vacation photos, but I paid attention to detail, always had, and that skill was about to matter more than anyone in that room expected. My dad saw something in me that my mother never acknowledged. He never said it loudly, that wasn't his way, but he said it in the ways that counted, and one of those ways was a legal document he signed 14 months before he died. If you've ever been the one who showed up every single time, handled every hard thing, kept every promise, and still felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Subscribe right now because I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been the one who gave everything and still got treated like you didn't belong? Tell me below. Click hype and let's go. My father passed on a Tuesday in March. It was fast, a heart attack, and then he was gone. I didn't have time to prepare for the grief, and I definitely didn't have time to prepare for what came next. 2 weeks after the funeral, my mother called me. She said she needed me at the house to go over some things. I thought she meant logistics, insurance paperwork maybe, bills that needed sorting. That was the kind of thing I usually handled. I drove over with a notebook and a pen, the way I always did. But when I walked into the living room, something felt off. Derek was already there, sitting back like he owned the chair. Paige was next to him, legs crossed, phone face down on the table. My mother was at the head, which she always was. Nobody looked surprised to see me, but nobody looked like they'd been waiting for me either. It felt like I'd walked into the second act of something. My mother didn't ease into it. She slid a document across the table and folded her hands. "Your father revised his will before he passed," she said. "You're listed as a witness, not a beneficiary. I thought you should hear it from us first." I looked at the papers. My name was there, in the witness line, not the beneficiary section. My share of the estate, which included a partial stake in the auto parts business and a piece of land my father had specifically told me would come to me someday, had been redistributed. Derek got the business, Paige got the land. I got nothing, except the quiet suggestion that this had all been my father's decision. Then Paige spoke, and her voice was almost soft, like she was doing me a favor. "Dad just felt like you were already so independent. He didn't think you needed it the way we did." I sat with that for a second. I let it land, because I wanted to remember exactly how it felt. My father never said that to me. Not once, not in any form. He told me I was proud of me. He told me I trusted him. He never said I didn't need what he'd promised. Those words did not come from my father. I was certain of that, the way I'm certain of very few things. I kept my face calm. I said I needed some time to process, and I left. On the drive home, something shifted in my brain. It wasn't grief this time. It was something colder and more focused. I'd spent 11 years reading legal documents. I knew my father's longtime attorney, a man named Mr. Holt, who had handled the family's affairs since before I was in high school, and I knew with quiet certainty that Mr. Holt had a very specific way of doing things, a specific format, a specific notary stamp. The document on that table didn't feel like his work. I picked up my phone at a red light and made a call. What came next happened in 3 waves, and each one hit harder than the last. The first wave came when I started asking questions about the estate process. I called Derek, calm and direct, and asked him when the family had met with the attorney to discuss the will. He paused just a half second too long before he answered. "Mom set that up a few weeks ago. It was just a formality." I asked why I wasn't included. "Mom handles these things, Renee. You've always been off doing your own thing." I wrote that down. Date, time, exact words. I'd learned early in my career that memory is unreliable, but notes are not. The second wave came at the post-funeral gathering at my aunt's house about a week later. Extended family came from 3 different states, people I hadn't seen in years, and one by one they found Derek and Paige to offer their condolences about taking on the business. One of my uncles clapped Derek on the shoulder and said, "Your father would be glad you're stepping up." A cousin pulled Paige aside and told her the land had always suited her better anyway. Not one person came to me with a single word about any of it, because my family had already told everyone I'd stepped aside, voluntarily, gracefully, by choice. They had made me the author of my own erasure, and they'd done it before I even had a chance to speak. I stood near the window with a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking, and I felt something settle inside me. Not acceptance, not surrender, something harder than both of those. The third wave came when I tried one more time to have an honest conversation with my mother. I went to her house on a Sunday. I sat across from her at her kitchen table. The refrigerator hummed, the afternoon light was flat and gray through the curtains. I told her calmly that I had questions about the will, that I wanted to understand when the revision had been made and why I hadn't been consulted. She looked at me for a long moment, and then her eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe you'd question your father's wishes at a time like this," she said. Her voice broke just enough. "After everything I've done for you." I didn't respond. I let her keep going. She talked about sacrifice and grief and how hard this was for the whole family, and she talked about it until the conversation was no longer about me at all. That was the third wave, and after it passed, I was done being a wave. I was going to be the ground. Every time they expected me to cry or disappear, I got quieter. I wrote everything down. Every date, every conversation, everything that was said and by whom. And while they were performing their version of grief, I was doing what I'd always done best. I was building a case. Here is what nobody in my family understood about me. I hadn't spent 11 years as a paralegal to shuffle papers. I'd spent 11 years learning how legal documents work, what they're supposed to look like, what makes them valid, and what makes them fall apart. I took the revised will home that first night, and I read every line. Most people would have seen a legal document and accepted it as official. I saw something different. The font spacing on the signature line was slightly tighter than the rest of the document. That can happen, but it's unusual when a document is created as one file. The notary stamp was the thing that stopped me cold. It used an abbreviation that I recognized from older documents, an abbreviation Mr. Holt's office had formally stopped using years ago when the county updated its certification format. I knew that because I had spent 11 years working with legal documents. I knew what a rushed forgery looked like, and this one wasn't even careful. I filed a records request with the county probate office. It's a right any interested party has, and I exercised it without telling anyone. 3 days later, the original will landed in my email inbox. My hands went still when I opened it. My father's original will, signed and notarized 14 months before he died, had my name in it. My inheritance was there, the land was there, the stake in the business was there, every single thing that had been quietly removed from the document my mother slid across that table. And the notary stamp on the revised version my mother had presented, The date on it didn't match any record in the county system. I closed my laptop. I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time. Then I made an appointment with Mr. Holt. I didn't come to Mr. Holt's office to cry. I came with a folder, a highlighter, and 11 years of knowing exactly what to look for. Mr. Holt was semi-retired. He kept a small office that smelled like wood polish and old books, with framed certificates lining one entire wall. When I laid the two documents in front of him, side by side, he didn't say anything for almost a full minute. He put on his reading glasses, he leaned in close, he looked at the notary stamps the way a doctor looks at an x-ray when something isn't right. Then he sat back and said quietly, "I did not prepare this, and your father never contacted my office about any changes to his estate plan." He said it simply, the way people say things when the truth is plain and they have no reason to dress it up. I asked him if he would come to the will reading my mother had scheduled. He said yes before I finished the question. While Mr. Holt and I were meeting quietly, my family was moving fast. Derek had already started calling suppliers. He introduced himself as the new head of the business at a regional trade event that my father had attended every year. He told people the company was heading in a new direction, his direction. He said it with the confidence of someone who had already counted a pile of money that wasn't fully his yet. Paige posted a tribute to my father on her social media. It was beautifully written, full of light and warmth. She tagged the business account. She tagged cousins and aunts and old family friends. She talked about legacy and love and continuing what her father built. She did not mention my name once. My mother called me the week before the reading. She sounded relaxed. "I'm glad you're being mature about this, Renee. Your father would be proud of how graceful you're being." I smiled at the wall across from me. "I just want everything handled properly, Mom." They thought my silence meant I had accepted it. I had no idea I was giving them exactly enough rope. Mr. Holt filed a formal probate challenge with the county court 3 days before the reading. It was a quiet filing, a procedural document. It would appear at exactly the right moment. The will reading was held in the office of the attorney my mother had hired, a younger man named Mr. Briggs, whose handshake was too firm and his smile was too ready. His office had new furniture and framed diplomas that were positioned to be seen from the door. I noticed that kind of thing. Derek and Paige arrived together. My mother came in wearing a dark blazer, composed and settled, like someone attending a ceremony they'd already rehearsed. They chose their seats, set down their bags, exchanged glances that said, "This is almost done." Then I walked in, with Mr. Holt beside me. My mother's eyes went to him first, then back to me. Something shifted behind her face, quick and private, but I saw it. I'd been watching her face my entire life. I knew every version of it. Mr. Briggs cleared his throat and began working through the procedural opening of the reading. He was halfway through explaining the document in front of him when Mr. Holt reached into his briefcase, removed a certified court document, and placed it on the table without a word. Mr. Briggs stopped. Mr. Holt spoke. His voice was even, unhurried, the way people speak when they have nothing to be nervous about. "Before this proceeds, the court has flagged the notarization on the revised document. The stamp used was retired from active use in this county 26 months ago. The date on this will is not possible." Derek moved first. He leaned forward, and I could hear the shift in his breathing. "That's a clerical error," he said. "That doesn't mean anything." Mr. Holt looked at him. "The county probate office disagrees." I opened my folder. I set the original certified will on the table. I set the printed records from the county probate office beside it. I set down the side-by-side comparison of the two notary stamps that I had printed, labeled, and highlighted in yellow. Everything I'd put in that folder, I had documented methodically, the way I'd documented things for 11 years. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was emotional. Every page said one thing clearly. Someone in this room falsified a legal document. My mother had not spoken. She was still. Not the composed still she'd walked in with, a different kind of still, the kind that comes after something collapses. I looked at her directly. I kept my voice low and steady. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said, I'm here because my father made a legal decision that someone in this room decided to override, and I have 11 years of knowing exactly how these documents work. Paige spoke up. Her voice was careful, like someone walking on something they weren't sure would hold. Mom just wanted what was best for the family. I looked at her. Then she should have talked to me. Instead, she signed my name off a document my father created. That's not grief, that's fraud. Mr. Briggs could not continue the proceeding. He knew it, the room knew it. He set down his pen and said he would need the pause until the probate matter was formally resolved. My mother stood up. She didn't say a word to me. She picked up her bag and she walked out of that office. Derek followed her. Paige sat for one more moment, looked at the table, and then she left too. I sat with Mr. Holt in the quiet office for a few minutes after they were gone. The clock on his wall ticked. Outside, a car door closed. "Your father chose the right person to look after his legacy," Mr. Holt said. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to say much else in that moment. In the weeks that followed, the probate court completed its review and validated the original will. My inheritance was restored in full. The land my father had promised me, the stake in the auto parts business, everything he'd meant to leave me came back, exactly as he'd written it. I didn't fight Derek for control of the business. That was never what I wanted. I requested a fair financial buyout for my share based on an independent valuation, and Derek agreed because he had no real choice and he knew it. I appointed a neutral business manager to oversee the transition. Everything was handled through proper channels, clean, legal, documented. My mother never apologized. I didn't expect her to. What changed was simpler than an apology. She stopped performing. She stopped playing the role of the wronged and gracious matriarch because the audience for that performance was gone. There was no version of the story left where she was the reasonable one. I used to think I had to make them see my value. I don't believe that anymore. My father saw it. He put it in writing. I just made sure the writing survived. The hardest thing I ever did wasn't confronting my family. It was trusting that being quiet, being careful, and being competent was enough. It was. It always had been. If someone in your family has ever tried to cut you out from an inheritance, a business, a decision that was rightfully yours, you already know how deep that kind of betrayal goes. It doesn't just take something from you. It makes you question whether you were ever really seen at all. Subscribe and tell me in the comments, did you ever discover something in your family that you weren't supposed to find? I want to hear your story, and click hype to help this video reach every person who has been quietly erased from what they were promised. Standing up for yourself is tough, especially when it's your own family you're standing against. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.